Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Hot for Teacher. I'm Adam Coble. This is episode number 17. Hot for Teacher. We haven't been here in a while. I was looking back. It's been a couple of weeks, what with life being busy as it is, and this show being the occasional weighty situation that it is. The busier I get, the harder I find that it is to do these episodes. So hello, thank you for coming. Welcome. I'm glad that we get a chance to do one of these. Way back when, probably like a year on now, we were doing an episode of the other write-in advice show, Office Hours, and I was being teased by you, my audience, as I often do, about how almost all of my role-playing game advice was just be better at having relationships with your players. So I thought, okay, fine then. We'll just do a different show. So now, Hot for Teacher, we're on episode number 17 now, and we've been doing this a little while. It is just like Office Hours, a write-in advice show, but instead of talking about tabletop role-playing games, though we'll do a little bit of that, I'm talking about relationships, which is like pretty cool. It's a thing that I care about a lot. So today, we're going to be talking about friendship and love and sex and other related quandaries of human interaction. I like to think of these episodes not as being solutions to specific problems necessarily. Like, I can talk about what I think and my experiences about the things that you ask me about, but I'm really hoping that what this show does is prompt additional conversation. I hope that it gets your brain going. I hope you hear the things that I'm saying and you think, yeah, interesting. I may or may not agree, but I'm going to talk about this stuff with other people that I care about and that I'm close to. I'm going to go out into my peer groups and we're going to talk about relationships because fundamentally, the biggest advice I can give you is just talk about stuff. Communication is the real deal when it comes to relationship stuff. So today we're going to answer 3 questions, and we're going to start today's episode off with a question from Broth. So Broth says, and let me know, I think this is a question that's going to resonate for a lot of people, to the point where I feel like I have almost already answered it in bits and pieces, but I want to directly hone in on this question. So Broth says, I'm a guy who's normally pretty confident in most things. Okay, cool. Work, home, GMing. But when it comes to approaching women for a physical and emotional relationship that I'm seeking, it all evaporates and I can't even talk to the object of my desires. It's interesting phrasing. We'll talk about that, Broth. The normal advice from friends and family is just don't be scared, or what's the worst that can happen, or don't worry about it. We'll talk about that too. So if this was as simple as a light switch, it wouldn't be a problem anymore, obviously, right? What should Broth do? What should Broth do here? So I think this is a fairly common feeling, universally, but it's my understanding that this feeling is especially common among men who are yep, I am confident in the things that I like. I'm confident in my job. I'm confident with my family. I feel comfortable exerting my needs and desires on the world around me. Uncertainty and fear generally are pretty common feelings for all humans, but this fear of escalating a relationship is one that I definitely remember struggling with. And I don't think the issue here is just with Broth here being unable to bolster his courage to do the thing. It goes deeper into why we even think the thing, which is to say engaging a person, in this case a woman we're interested in a emotional or physical relationship. Why is that nerve-wracking in the first place? What about it fundamentally makes it feel like a big deal? Why is this suddenly a big deal? So before we really get into that stuff, before we get talking about that, let's talk about this idea of what's the worst that can happen and why it's such a completely useless platitude. Why is it a totally useless thing to say to a person? Right? This is right up there with it could have been worse. Or like Broth said, just get over it. Don't say these things to people who are having a hard time. Just don't do it. Because here's the thing. we as people, we do things every single day of our lives where the answer to what's the worst that can happen is you fucking die. Every time we get into a car, what's the worst could happen? Death. Horrible death. Every single day, you are in multiple occasions one bad decision away from utter obliteration. So it's obviously not about that, right? About a worst case scenario. It's about a weird prioritization, right? Because the actual answer here, the real answer to what's the worst that could happen is we could feel horrible about ourselves because we were rejected by someone we're interested in. That's the worst that could happen. The worst that could happen is our feelings could be very badly hurt. We could feel rejected. We could feel all kinds of negative stuff, which is why I think for men particularly, it's a really weird thing to struggle with because we're forced to pretend that disappointment and rejection and being hurt emotionally aren't the worst thing. Like, it could be worse. We have to pretend so as to reduce their impact on us. And I gotta say, I think that feeling sad and rejected and hurt and having to face disappointment sucks. It sucks really bad. And it's real. So I think telling someone what's the worst that could happen implies that these are feelings that we should just be able as men to ignore. That we should just be able to act like our hurt feelings are irrelevant because, hey, it could be worse, right? So instead of pretending that hurt feelings and sadness and disappointment and anxieties are irrelevant or not the worst thing that could happen, let's talk about ways we can de-escalate those feelings. Because 9 times out of 10, I gotta say, it's anticipation of rejection that's bad. Like, being rejected sucks, but it doesn't suck nearly as bad as being in that situation where you worry about being rejected, where you feel pre-upset, and that can completely throw you off. That's how we reduce the idea of this being the worst case scenario, right? This is how we make it feel like this is a big deal. So let's just straight up acknowledge this. Okay, Broth, it's scary asking someone out. I'm going to admit it. I'm going to admit it, and we're all going to just agree. Yes, you're in a situation where fear can certainly be present. It is scary to admit to someone that you like them. That is also potentially scary. Your feelings are real, Broth. That's a real thing. I think the reason that this stuff can be especially scary is because there's an expectation, right? We don't go into these situations simply to express what we're feeling. We go into these situations because there is the expectation of response. There is a hope that they will say to you, I also feel that way about you. So you build up this expectation that there is a response, that if you get that response, everything's fine. But if you don't get that response, things are not fine, right? We very rarely say to people, I really like you, and I think that you're cute, and I would really like to spend more time being intimate with you, and maybe we could make out, without some expectation of response. That's just not the social engagement that we're sort of programmed for these situations. And we'll talk about why that's stupid in a second, but I think I want to continue to acknowledge that I think of all of the things, all of the negative stuff that I've experienced in my life, right? All of the grief and anger and sadness and negative stuff that tends to sort of crust up around a human life, like barnacles on a ship. I think that for me, disappointment might be the thing that hurts the most. And when I was thinking about this question, when I was thinking about Broth's question, I really thought about this, right? I kind of like, I wanted to be sure that this was something that I could say for real. And this isn't to say that I have not experienced like a lot of really bad stuff. Like every life has bad things that happen in them. But I think that for me, disappointment is maybe the worst feeling, right? And it's weird, but it's so hard to want something so badly and then not to be able to have that thing that you want. And there's a lot of socio-political stuff tied up around this. I could go on a tangent about how capitalism commodifies the objects of our desire, blah, 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 but that's not what this is about. I don't want to go down that road, but we could. The idea here is that like grief and sadness and jealousy and anger, that stuff I can handle, but deep, meaningfully high stakes disappointment's a real heartbreaker for me. So I empathize. I hear you, Broth. I'm feeling you. So I think that there's basically two things that can mitigate disappointment, right? Because that's what you're kind of trying to avoid here. You're potentially afraid of being disappointed. So there's basically two things I think you can do to mitigate future disappointment. And once it's mitigated, you are freed to express yourself in a way that doesn't feel like so cataclysmically high stakes. So the first is de-escalating what's at stake here. So I'm going to talk about being a man for a second. And I think that a lot of men feel pressure internally or from external sources to be in a romantic or sexual relationship. I don't think that this is like revolutionary. I don't think I'm saying anything no one's ever thought or felt before. I think that men particularly are judged on whether they are in a relationship or not in a relationship. I think that is a factor. There is a lot of social pressure about what it means to be a real man. And part of that is having a woman, right? The idea of masculinity as a paradigm of ownership, right? If you do not have a woman in your life, if you're not in a like heteronormative relationship, you are not a real man, which even if you are heterosexual and interested in a relationship and you would like these things, let alone if you're asexual or aromantic, let alone all of that, there's a ton of pressure, right? There's this whole mythos around, behind every good man is a great woman, and you need to, now there's a lot of pressure on women to be in relationships too, but it's different than this situation, right? We're talking about Broth's situation. Now, this might not be a conscious thing, right? Like this isn't necessarily someone sitting down and thinking, I will not be a man until unto me I have a woman. I must get a hold of a lady, right? That's not always an intentional conscious thing. And it certainly doesn't touch on the vast spectrum of LGBT relationships and what those are like. But there is a pressure there one way or another, which can amp up those feelings of anxiety. It escalates the situation because the idea that a sexual relationship or romantic relationship is somehow de facto a significant thing and part of your identity as a man inherently commodifies that relationship. It gives it an external value and it separates you from other people into these divisive categories of has and does not has, right? It can feel really bad and it can be really self-demeaning to look at yourself and see the things you are lacking, which can lead to wanting those things more desperately, which can lead to feelings of fear around failing to get them. So while we're trying to reduce the impact of being in a sexual or romantic relationship, we should inversely increase the significance of the other relationships in our lives, right? It's really nice to find people who want to do the same things as we do. And sometimes those things are sex stuff or romance. But let's not overlook the importance of a good tennis partner or a gaming group or any other sort of close friendship, right? Building up your other relationships and being more open to the meaningfulness of those relationships will help reduce the on a pedestal nature of romance or sex. And it'll level out that playing field a little bit and hopefully make seeking out romance or sex less scary, right? I think the second thing that we can do to help mitigate that fear of disappointment is stop trying to get a relationship, right? And start learning how to be accepting and happy with the kinds of relationships we're already in, right? Now, I want to talk for a second about Broth's phrasing here, because the bit that kind of I wanted to call out was, can't even talk to the object of my desires. Now, I get that it's a phrase. I get that's a thing that people say, but I think we all know that people aren't objects, right? I think we all know that this is a person. But I think it's really important here to recognize that relationships aren't objects either. A relationship is not a thing you can have or not have. You can own a TV, you can own a car, but a relationship is the byproduct of two people's interactions. It's a non-object. You cannot hold it in your hand. You can try to understand the boundaries that make it up, but it's not a real object. It's not a thing you can have. So for me, something that's really helped me decouple myself from a lot of relationship pressure is looking at relationships not as a thing to be in or have, but it's the synthesis of two people's lives, right? It's the overlap. It's the Venn diagram. There's all of the shit that I want, and there's all the shit other people want. And where those two bubbles overlap with any given person, that's the relationship. This is actually a really good exercise to do with a person, is to sit down and be like, cool, okay, here's all the stuff that I want to do, and here's all the stuff you want to do. Everything that's on both of our lists, that's the good stuff. That's the stuff that makes up our relationship, right? It's really nice. So think about a relationship not as a thing that you need to go out and get. Think of it as a byproduct of the relationship, of the person that you're in. The relationship is with someone else, and there's a byproduct. That's the relationship. The reason that I want to talk about this, the reason why I think this is important, is because it can help lower your expectations on the significance of being in a specific kind of relationship. If you let your relationships develop organically, it stops being all or nothing. It stops being black and white. Honestly, I think that we expect relationships to be a lot more clear-cut than they are, and that relationships are supposed to be these really obvious transitional states, when in real life, in actuality, things are often quite messy and complex. And that's why we talk to people about the things we want, and we let ourselves be flexible when we're listening to the things that they want. And what it all comes down to, I think, in more practical terms, is reminding ourselves that there are valid, meaningful relationships that don't involve sex or romance, and those are okay places to end up too. It's cool to be real with someone about what you want, right? To just straight up say, like, hey, I think you're really cute, and I want to spend more time with you. I want to get to know you in an intimate way, and I'm attracted to you. But relationships are a byproduct. And when you say to a person, I would like to do the sex with you, or I have the romance feelings at you, you want to be able to be open and engaged with what their feelings are. So that if they say, rad, me too, let's bone, or no thank you, ne pas de sex, you want to be in a place where both of these things can lead to a good relationship either way. All you're doing is clarifying. You're not expecting a response from them. Okay, all right, I'm gonna make an awkward RPG metaphor, because that's what you're here for. Let's do it. Awkward RPG metaphor. When you go into these conversations, you basically have two choices. You can be Dungeons and Dragons. You can make a persuasion roll, and you can fail, and you can be bummed out, and you can try again, and you can try again, but it's just going to wear you down, and it's going to be bad for everybody. Or you can be Burning Wheel, and you can fail forward. So even if your desires and the desires of the person you are talking to don't match up, it doesn't bring the whole narrative of your relationship to a halt, right? It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean everything is a failure. It just means the path that you are taking forward goes in a different direction. So, Broth, what I'm saying here is that it's okay to want to be in a sexual relationship. It's okay to want to be in a romantic relationship, but it's not okay to want those relationships in the same way that you might want a new car. And I think a way that you can help yourself get through this feeling is to give yourself space to develop and value relationships with people regardless of the content of those relationships. Build emotional connections, build spaces with people where you could be open and honest about your feelings and desires, and let go of a predisposition to a specific outcome. It's hard because you're allowed to want what you want. You just need to develop skills and a viewpoint that lets you be better at being less scared of not getting those things. Attachment to outcomes leads to suffering. If you want a relationship with a person because you are interested in them, that should be good enough. If you are in a relationship with a person that is intimate and close and you are able to share your feelings and desires, then you can tell them, this is a thing that I would like to be part of our Venn diagram. Is that true for you? Could you envision a world where it would be fun if we added sex stuff to this thing that we do together? They might say yes, they might say no. If they say no, it's okay to be disappointed, but don't be disappointed because you had an attachment to a specific outcome, right? Be attached to the idea of being in the relationship and let the contents of that relationship develop organically. Our third question, I'm going to go into a lot more depth about that kind of thing, about how to develop organic relationships. But I think the thing here is de-escalation can lead to feeling just generally more chill about shit, which means that we don't freak out and clam up when we could just be having meaningful talks with people. The thing is about need and want is that, and this is really weird. This is a weird thing. This is a weird way that desire works in our brains. It's often easiest to find ourselves in possession of things we've realized we only want and we don't need. As soon as you stop feeling like there's high stakes and you really need something, it'll be much easier to relax, and then you will find yourself in possession of those things. Again, being chill isn't going to get you a new car, but being chill will let your relationships evolve in an organic way, which can lead to intimacy, which can lead to boning. There are a lot of different paths to move through a relationship. There's a lot here, obviously, and it's not just about Broth getting over it or being brave or manning up, right? Certainly, there's a benefit in being able to process fear, but I think it's more about recognizing that your lack of confidence is probably based on your seeing these kinds of relationships as being a bigger commodified deal than they really are. I think if you learn to be less attached to outcomes, letting go of the urgency of that need and developing your relationships organically, I think you're gonna have a much better time of things. And like always, cultivate a strong relationship with your own damn self, because when it really comes down to it, relationships don't matter. People will come and go from your life, but the only person you are stuck with forever is you. So if you can get that shit straight and recognize that everyone else and your relationship with them, while significant, in the end, you die alone. You're going to be lying in that grave by yourself, Broth. So like, get with yourself. Get good with you first. And then all your other relationships, whether they last a long time, they last a short time, whatever their content, it's going to feel way less high stakes because you're good with yourself, right? I believe in you, Broth. You can do it. Just don't get it in your head that shit is so important. All right. Our second question comes from an anonymous question asker. Anonymous question asker asks, Last year, I started a new romantic relationship. At the time, I was looking for something impermanent as I expected that I would be moving out of the area soon for college. Both of us understood this and things were going fine, and then a few months into it, I decided to forego going into college and instead focus more on my life outside of academics. Because of this, we have become a lot more serious, and I can truly say that I love her. Now, I feel my life pulling me in another direction with the possibility of moving to a different continent. And I don't know how to broach this subject with her when it's something that's definitely far away, more or less a year, but it's something that I very deeply want. Complicating things further is that this move would bring me closer to many people I deeply care about, which makes it seem like I am choosing them over her. You do seem a little all over the place, anonymous question asker, and we will talk about that. I think it's okay for the record. There's a delicate balance in relationships that we need to strike. Or there's a delicate balance that we are somehow expected to strike, I think. Outside of relationships, if we are an island unto ourselves, we are able to follow our whims, do as we please, allow our moment-to-moment desires to guide us. One day, we can be working a solid job, and the next, we've quit, started a new career. When we are single, we can live where we desire, right? In situations that make us happy, and we can pack up and leave whenever we feel like it. The reason that these things are possible in the time frame and with the ease in which they are possible is because we're outside of being beholden to anyone else. We're the only person to whom we're accountable, right? Single people are free agents with nothing tying them to society or to other people. They simply wander about, disconnected from the rest of reality. Except that shit is not true at all. We may be able to move freely through the world as we please, but it doesn't mean that we don't have friends and coworkers and families and other humans near us who'll be affected by those things. In the same way, I think there's nothing inherent about a serious romantic relationship. Excuse me. So in the same way, there's nothing inherent about a serious relationship that suddenly means we are chained to someone else's desires. Like with everything else, our choices about the trajectory of our lives comes down to our own responsibility and our own freedom. But that freedom is tempered by the relationships we choose to have in that world. I think that it's absolutely 100% entirely a false binary that we have freedom and commitment on either side. I absolutely hate the meme of like, oh, the old ball and chain. Every time I see someone on the internet talking about like, well, I'm getting married, guess I better sell my gaming console, or, well, I'm getting married, better give up everything I love in my life and cut out my own heart and light it on fire. Like, fuck that idea. I don't care. Even, you know what? Even the like most deeply controlled, specific BDSM agency-free relationships are entered freely, right? Relationships are about consenting to change our behavior for the sake of someone else. We must inherently do that from a position of agency and freedom. Otherwise, it doesn't count. Otherwise, it's not real. So I hate that shit. And I hate the false binary of like, you're in a relationship and you are bound to behave in a way that you don't want to be, or you are free and can do as you please and put your genitals on whatever you like. Like, I hate that shit. It's so stupid. The thing I think here that makes Anon's question seem like a really big deal is a combination of her previous decision-making history, right? She admits she made one decision, then changed her mind, and now she's set to change it again, potentially. And the high-stakes vibes that come along with something like moving away, right? So when it boils down to it, what we're really looking at is a higher stakes version of, I can't decide where we should eat for dinner or what movie should we go see. Fundamentally the same shit, but on a slightly more intense scale. This is a thing that Anon is having happen to her, right? A decision that she wants and needs to make about what to do next, but it does affect the people that she's close to. Now, before we get to the part where we talk about navigating out of this situation, let's just go ahead and do away with the idea that it matters at all if you've made one decision or another in the past. Decisions change, people change, fluidity is a given element of the human experience, so let's not worry, Anon, too much about whether or not you've been a flake in the past. To be honest, I can get where your anxiety comes from, right? There's an added layer of tension around the fact that you change your mind, then you change it again, then you change it back, then you change it again. But do not let that be the crux of the inevitable discussion, though, right? Own up to it. Admit, like, yo, I know that this is a thing. But don't forget that you are the mistress of your own destiny here, Anonymous. You can acknowledge that, yes, I get that it might feel like whiplash to have my decisions be made and then unmade and then made again, but don't let that become the focus of your conversation. Tell this person what you're thinking and feeling. Be honest about what you want. Be clear about what's already a done deal and what you're still looking to talk about before you get to your answer. And then give that person space to figure out what they want from their life. Tell them where you're at and then let them make their own call. Now, this might mean that they say, okay, cool, let's hang out for a year. That's nice. And then we'll say goodbye. Or it might mean, get away from me. I need to distance myself from you. Or it might be, can we talk about this being something that we can work out together? Go into that conversation knowing for you what is negotiable and what's on the table and what is already decided, and then stick to those boundaries. Now, this isn't something that you need to have figured out completely alone already, or something that you will ever need to figure out alone. But remember, you're not beholden to this person's desires, though it is cool to hear them out and learn what it is that they want. Now, if you've heard me talk about relationships before, which I suspect you might have, you know that I'm not a big fan of compromise in relationships. By which I mean saying with a person, I want A and you want B, but we're both going to take C because it's kind of halfway between the two and kind of like A and B. I don't like that because C is not A and C is not B, and doing C is bad for both of you. So what this means is you essentially have two choices. You need to stick to your guns, or you need to choose to do B because someone else's happiness is more important to you than doing A, right? I want to move to France. You want me to stay here. Is it more important to me that I move to France or stay with you? Pick one. Make that the thing that you do. Don't compromise. The two of you would not move to Kentucky, right? No one wants to move to Kentucky. You want to be in France, or you don't. This doesn't mean that you have to say, I go to France, too bad for you. It can mean I'm not going to move at all. I think the thing is, yeah, big ups to Kentucky. Sorry, Kentucky. I'm sure it's very nice. I think if you really want the thing, you need to decide if the thing is more important to you than your relationship. I'm going to say something that I hope is not revolutionary. Love is not more important than happiness. Best as anybody can tell, you get one shot at being alive. And your life is going to be full of many relationships. I feel like you need to be honest with this person, and you need to tell them what you're thinking and feeling, and then you need to invite them to share the same, and then you just got to do what you got to do. And whatever that is, I cannot tell you. I'm not going to make that call for you. I'm not going to say move to France or don't move to France, but I can reassure you it's okay to pursue your own happiness. In fact, It is the most okay thing there is. It is very literally the only thing that there is. Sometimes pursuing what we want and need for ourselves can be hard for other people. It can be hard to think we may hurt the people that we love. But don't be miserable for someone else's sake. Don't even be a little bit miserable for someone else's sake. Talk to this person. Let that talk change your relationship. Do what needs doing, and if that means moving away, there will always be other people for you to fall in love with. It goes back to what I was saying to Broth, right? Like, relationships come and go, but you will be with yourself forever. And Anonymous, I do not want you to be lying on your deathbed thinking, God, why didn't I move to France? I don't want that for you. So if you think moving to France is going to make you happy, I know that Anon did not say anything about France, but move to France, all right? If you want to move to France. It might hurt this person. That's okay. You're not beholden to them. You're beholden to you. Don't fuck that relationship up. Or move to Kentucky. I don't care. So today's third question, our last question today, comes from Tessa. And Tessa says, I have been in a hetero-monogamous relationship for almost 2 years. We're both turning 20 this year. I identify as asexual, biromantic, which for the lay viewer means that Tessa is not interested in sex as part of relationships and is interested in at least her own gender and others. People define biromantic bisexuality differently, but I'm going to assume that you are open to relationships with other people. But romantic relationships, not so much the boning. Lately, I have been feeling a desire to experience a relationship with a woman, like you do. I do see this relationship lasting for a long time. I assume you mean the hetero-monogamous relationship. But I don't want to miss out on that experience. Should I talk about a possible open relationship, or should I just be in this relationship until the moment arises to be in a relationship with a woman? Okay, so I chose to put Tessa and Anon right next to each other because I think that the two questions, Tessa's and Anonymous's question, illustrate some fundamentally similar things. I think in this case, Tessa is in a relationship that is one way, and she's thinking that she wants to be in a relationship that is a different way. I have this delicious bowl of SpaghettiOs, but I would really love a Hot Pocket. So much of the strife and heartache that happens in a relationship comes from a mismatch between what is and what could be. This idea of the grass being greener on the other side. And I think that the status is often so overwhelmingly quo, it can be hard to deviate from it. A lot of the time, the awkwardness and difficulty stems from being the one who has to suggest the new thing or break the news that this bowl of SpaghettiOs just isn't doing it for you anymore. I would really like, personally, myself, to be in a culture, to live in a culture where human behavioral fluidity is expected and understood instead of seen as a negative side effect. Now, I know we all want stability, and God, wouldn't it be nice if that stability was represented by the ongoing expectation and understanding that people will change, and that since we're able to acknowledge that people will change, we can change in a way that includes conversations with each other about that change. I think that there is a lot of anxiety about the idea of relationships being about building something. right? The feeling that change, whether it's change of desire, change of intentions, change of interest, is the antithesis of a stable relationship because it undermines that building. It undermines our efforts to construct a life together, construct a relationship, right? Like, I think the idea here, again, talking about false binaries, false dialectic, is that there aren't two opposites, stability and instability, right? We falsify the idea that people are unchanging. Now, we build up habits, certainly. We build up programs. We build up the status quo of a relationship such that it can be hard to escape it, but it doesn't mean we don't think about change. It doesn't mean we don't desire change. I mean, think about, this is how infidelity happens, where we don't want to be in a relationship anymore, but we've built a life together. And so we undermine the constants of that relationship in secret. We're unwilling to just talk about how we don't want to be in the relationship anymore. It's frustrating, and it's a nightmare. It's a total nightmare for everybody. So I would love to be in a place where we can talk about change as though it were a healthy, normal part of being a person. Another word for change is growth. I think this whole situation can be frustrating because it can lead to problems like the one Tessa is having. And in the previous question, where someone in a relationship wants, either is curious about or definitely is interested in a change, then they get to a place where they're not sure what to do about that desire. And it sounds to me like where Tessa is at is a fairly common place for a lot of young queer people, right? They're in one kind of relationship. Very often it is a straight-seeming monogamous relationship. And that relationship isn't necessarily fully making them feel satisfied. And so they're thinking about what it might be like to be in another kind of relationship. I think especially there is an undercurrent in the way that we look at bi and pan folks culturally that implies that they are greedy, right? This idea of wanting it all, not being okay, and that we ought to be satisfied just picking a team and playing for the Kentucky Gays or the Paris Straits, right? Let's just take that whole idea and fucking light it on fire and throw it out the window, okay? This isn't about I want everyone all the time. And even if it was, there is nothing wrong with wanting to have multiple romantic connections. Period. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, I would say wanting things in and of themselves isn't wrong. It's what comes after the wanting that gets tricky. How do we go from curiosity, intent, and desire to experience without necessarily discarding the status quo, the thing that we have? So what is one to do when one, like Tessa, is in a relationship with specific protocols that prohibit extra relational relations? What I'm going to say will not surprise you. Talk about it. The red flag in this question for me was that last sentence. Let's read it again. Or should I just be in this relationship until the moment arises to be in a relationship with a woman? I'm not going to get mad at you for this, Tessa, because you're just a youngin'. You're working this shit out. It's okay for you not to have the experience to know what a no red flag, bad zone, don't fucking do that is. Do not ever, if you can possibly manage it, do not ever be in a relationship just waiting for a newer, different, better one to come along. Nobody, no person is a holding pattern. Nobody ought to be good enough. Nobody should be a for now partner. That's a disservice to anyone who is a human being and you care about this person. So let's just push that off the table, right? If you find yourself, and this goes for everybody, not just Tessa, if you find yourself in a place where you're just like crouched on this relationship waiting like a spider for the next hot fly to come along, you're doing a massive disservice to the person that you're with. This can be a fundamental problem that arises in monogamy, where people just don't talk about their feelings and desires because they're not allowed, because these feelings and desires in and of themselves just shouldn't exist. There's this myth that if you are in love, you cannot love anyone else. I blame chivalry for this. Fuck that noise. It doesn't matter what kinds of relationships you're in. Your feelings are feelings that will happen. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're having these feelings and desires and you don't talk about them, that is a bullshit move for you and for everybody else. So don't do it. Don't do it. If you're in a monogamous relationship and you are interested in looking for something else, have a talk about it, right? That is the option. That is the one option you have. You discuss this thing. Now, discussing this with a monogamous person you are in a relationship with can be fucking difficult because the deck is stacked against you, right? It can be scary because even admitting these things can come across as hurtful because there's all of this stuff built up around it. It can be really scary because you might be going in with a presupposed idea of what you want to get out of that talk. So here's what I'd suggest. Have your feelings, right? Have your feelings. Understand where you're at as a person, what you're thinking and feeling, and be ready simply to express that stuff. This is just like I said to Broth, right? Have your feelings. Tell the people you care about your feelings. But don't go in with a solution. God, it's just like play testing, right? Know what's broken, but don't necessarily come to the table with a solution. Express the brokenness and then work together because the relationship is a byproduct of you and this other person. It's not just yours to fix. I'm not saying don't come to the table with questions, right? But prioritize a clear understanding of what it is that you want to express to this person. If you're struggling or you're scared, and I will tell you, I will happily admit here in the spirit of relationship solidarity, I still get anxious and scared of how people are going to react to me telling them my feelings. I still get anxious about asking someone, hey, I would super like to make out with you. Would that be okay? Or like, hey, I have feelings for you that are like intimate and significant for me. Or the opposite. Hey, I'm not really feeling this part of our relationship anymore. Or hey, I don't know if I want us to like do sex stuff together anymore. I still fucking feel that anxiety so bad. So it's okay to feel that. It's okay to be scared of having this conversation. It feels really vulnerable, and that's all right. You are allowed. It's okay to feel that stuff. If you are struggling, if you are scared, there are lots of ways that you can start a conversation that does not have to be so hard, right? You can write down the things that you want to say, and you can ask this person if you can read it to them. You can write them a letter and ask them to read it themselves. I mean, fuck it. You can call them on the phone. You can text message them. You can, anything you want. You can just let them know, I have something I want to express to you. I'm having a really hard time saying it out loud. This would be easier for me. There is no valid or invalid way of communicating your feelings as long as you get the other person's buy-in on this. If you were talking to someone, if you were engaging in a situation where you're like, I feel really uncomfortable, I have something I want to express, can we do it this way? And they're like, no, you have to do it the way I want. They're probably a big jerk. Talk, negotiate, figure out a way that feels safe and comfortable for both of you. I'm just saying, you don't have to make a big deal out of it. It can be another way to get at those things. The point here is that it's more important to express yourself than expressing yourself in a specific way. Do not forget that. The other thing is, if you come in without a specific solution, and I know that sounds weird, but if you come in with the only intention being, I want to tell you about my feelings, that means that you can work out the stuff that comes after together, right? This also means the chances of rejection are much lower because there's nothing to shoot down. If you go into a situation with someone and you say, I feel anxious because I want to talk to you about how I am having romantic feelings about someone who is not you, and that makes me feel weird because I'm in a monogamous relationship with you, and they say, no, you're not. No, you're not feeling that. Run. Just run. Run for the hills. That relationship is over. Don't let anybody tell you what you're feeling. They can't say, no, you don't feel that. So work out what's in your head. Ask the person to talk about it in a way that feels safe for both of you. Get it out, and then give that person time and space to ask questions and to process, right? This is a great time to reassure them that you're still into them, right? This is a great time to be like, I'm feeling this, but I'm also still feeling this, right? I love you. And that's not true anymore because I want to have sex with other people. Or in your case, I want to be romantic with other people. It's a great time to just like let them know you want to be with them still. You recognize that they're going to feel some feelings, and that's okay and cool. Talk with them about another time where you can follow up on that conversation and what that might mean. I think it's super important not to have the this is what we feel talk at the same time as the what do we do about our feelings talk. Separate those two. Be patient. There's no hurry. But be clear. Pick a time. Set a specific particular time, if you can, to just discuss it together. Be like, okay, so I want to talk to you about my feelings. Here we go. I have some room for you to talk about your feelings. Let's not try to fix this. Let's try not to like repair or reestablish. But like, how about tomorrow? How about after dinner in a week? How about whatever? Let's talk about it. Because that gives them some time to talk with their friends. It gives them some time to think it over themselves. You want to give it some space. And when you get there, then you can have a talk about changing the shape of your relationship to better fit what you both need. And that for you could mean a lot of stuff. It might work. It might mean that you work out together the first steps towards a non-monogamous thing. It might mean changing the ways you're intimate with each other. It might mean the end of this relationship as it stands. And this is the part you want to work on together because, like I told Broth, a relationship is only the thing that happens when two people intersect their lives and desires. You both get to have ideas and input. Sit down and have that talk. Be like, all right, what does our new list of shared things look like? Be open, listen, but be clear about your boundaries. Don't say yes to anything that you mean no to, and take your time. Remember, if you're doing this with someone that cares about you and that you care about, the best thing, the thing that always makes me feel better, the thing that I always feel frees me from feeling scared is that a conversation with someone that loves me, I'm never having it alone, right? You're not alone. You're with someone who you trust and who, even if you're upsetting them or even if they're having some feelings, you're working on it together. And that's what's really nice. And if it comes down to it that they need to not be in a relationship with you anymore, you love them too. And you want them to feel like they have the freedom to do what's right for them. I have definitely been in situations where people have said to me, hey, this relationship is changing into something that I don't want to be a part of anymore. And because of that, I don't feel comfortable being close to you anymore. I'm going to need some space. And that might mean I need some space from you like permanently. We may just like, I just need time to not be near you. And it sucks and it hurts. But I'm not the kind of person who's going to say, no, you have to fix it. We have to stay friends. Because if you love someone, and this is such a fucking corny cliche, but if you love someone, the truest act of love you can give them is self-determination. Not getting in the way of the things that they need to be happy. And sometimes that means that you need to fuck off from their life. Now, I don't think that's going to happen for you, Tessa. I don't think that this relationship that you're in is with someone who necessarily is going to be like, well, if you want to be in relationships with ladies, you get out of here forever. But if it is, yes, that sucks. And yeah, it's a shame they couldn't do better. But you got to trust them to take care of themselves. Talking and processing your feelings and learning the ways in which your feelings can direct your life, but don't have to. It takes a lot of work. It can be very tricky, but it's a lot better than suffering in silence or just trying to make decisions on your own, I find. at least. So if you and this person both care about each other, you're going to be able to work together and talk it out. And whatever shape your relationship ends up taking, you're going to be able to know that you got there intentionally, that you got there on purpose. And I think that shit's hella empowering. So that's it for today's episode. This was episode number 17 of Hot for Teacher. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Relationships are something that we all, one way or another, participate in, whether with ourselves or with other people, whether deep, intense relationships or surface relationships, whether we're talking about casually interacting with people or whether we're talking about having relationships with people that we have been close to for our whole lives. This stuff all fundamentally matters. And I think that if you're going to take away anything, it's that talking about your feelings is always okay, no matter your gender, no matter the relationships that you're in. And the people that love you and that you love should be open and interested in being able to engage with you in that way. And like I said at the beginning, don't let this be the end. Don't let this be the only thing that gets you thinking or talking about relationships today or this week or this month. Like, talk to your counselor, talk to your therapist, talk to your mom or your dad or your siblings, talk to the people you love, talk to your friends, talk to Twitch chat, right? Have relationships and do so consciously and intentionally, and take care of yourself out there. Because when it comes down to it, we all die alone. Thanks for coming, everybody. This has been Hot for Teacher. If you want to get involved, go to www.adam-koble.com. Click on the Hot for Teacher link. Fill out that form. Tell me about your feelings. Tell me about your relationships. Tell me about your quandaries. Talk to me about your existential dread. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with more exciting relationship stuff. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. See you next time.